Today's episode is with Brad Englert. Brad wrote a very good and easy to digest business book called Spheres of Influence based on his experience being one of the top CIOs in the country. So we spend a lot of time going over some of the things that make hiring and being hired better for both the employees as well as the employer. There's a lot of his personal war stories in the book that we didn't get to, but we did cover a great deal here. So with that, here is Brad Englert. I think it's worth talking about your hearing aid for a second.
Sure. So
I have a different sort of thing that I think has, I don't know, I wouldn't say disabled exactly, but it has definitely changed my trajectory, which is that I cannot read. I just can't do it. It's like very, very difficult. It takes me forever to read anything. It's funny because we're here to talk about a book, and I talk about a lot of books, as a matter of fact. But I also see it as kind of a strange superpower in a weird way. And it has enabled me to get other people to do the things I need them to do. And with great success, it's actually worked well in my life. And in reading your book, it seems like your hearing, or lack thereof in one ear specifically, has actually enabled you to start conversations that you may not otherwise have had.
Yeah. I would let people know that they're on the right ear, which is the one that works. And if I turn the left ear, then I'm turning the deaf ear. And then later on, they'll say, well, am I in your good ear? And I said, no, it's my responsibility to put you on the right side.
And it's also, I'm hesitant to say this because I don't mean it to be a victim card exactly. That's not actually that's not what I'm trying to say, although it might kind of sound that way first. It is a vulnerability, and if you show people that you have vulnerabilities, even if it's kind of ultimately a minor vulnerability, it's like haha, I'm going to send something that it'll take you forever to read it, Yeah, that is true. It will take me forever to read it, but I don't really consider that to be a vulnerability. It's more like okay, you've just wasted some of my time, assuming I haven't just decided to stop reading this thing.
How do you do with audiobooks?
Audio is great. Audio is great. Sometimes I have to go back a little bit just because I think this is pretty typical. You're like, that was a really interesting turn of phrase. I need to hear it again. Hear it again, make sure I really got it. But no, I do well. In fact, I actually do it on like 1.4 speed usually. It seems like around the sweet spot for me.
Well, I have this on audiobook.
Oh, do you really? Well, see, but you didn't have it when I started reading it.
It's actually out on Spotify in 2 weeks.
Okay, all right. Okay, I feel better because
in production.
Because I was going to say that was. Oh yeah. So tell me about the process. What's that like?
Oh, it's interesting. I've never written a book before, so from the beginning, it's been a lot of learning. And I did write a blog once a week for 800 weeks, so I have a lot of blogs. But to actually put together a long form, was something I didn't know how to do. So my PR firm introduced me to a publisher here in town who basically you hire them like a consultant. So I was a consultant. If someone wanted to implement a payroll system, they'd hire me because I've done it 15 times. But I never wrote a book before. And their first principle was you don't write one word until you have a full outline. Well, I was a programmer. You don't write code till you have a design. You don't build a house till you have a blueprint. And so it just spoke to me. And they helped me all the way through to the point where I had a manuscript. I could share it with colleagues and friends, get their feedback. And I had probably 3 or 4 different editors, all with different points of view, which was very helpful. And then it came to the audiobook, and they said, well, do you want to do your audiobook? I said, oh, with my Texas accent? I don't think so. Why don't we hire a trained professional? And so they sent me like 5 to 7 different readings of a page out of the book. And I wanted someone who's personable, got the jokes, wasn't over dramatic, because it's not a dramatic book. And we found
no funny voices.
Kind of found a folksy kind of guy.
Sure, yeah.
I really liked.
Oh,
and
it
didn't take long. It took.
So were you there when he did it, or you
no,
just?
It's all virtual.
Oh, that's nice. Okay. The problem with me, I have a book as well, but the problem with my book is I would have to read my book, and I can't read. And so the thing is, I wrote it, but like it's a totally different thing to write. You know, I can write at whatever speed, but reading, you have to kind of read at a pace that other people are going to understand.
Yeah.
Can't stop 15 times in a single sentence and start over, you know? So I don't know. I thought that was kind of interesting, actually. Okay, so why don't you talk a little bit about your background? I think you have a fairly interesting background, actually, that I think it dovetails us into the book. So let's talk about that.
Well, I after college, I went to Arthur Andersen & Co. because they had this wonderful training program, basically a 3-year apprenticeship program, where they take someone like me with a liberal arts undergrad and a public affairs graduate degree, no computer at all. But I knew I wanted to get into the field, and I did some research, and the Wall Street Journal had an article about Arthur Andersen's training facility outside of Chicago, and they bring people from all over the world, and they teach them how to code. And then you go...
What programming language, out of curiosity?
COBOL.
Oh, of course.
COBOL 2. It was the modern COBOL 2.
Oof.
And we actually had online entry, so we weren't using punch cards, so that was good. But they taught you the principles of, you know, what's a good program, what's good design. Then you'd program for a year or so, and then you go to design school, and then you'd go design programs for a year or two. And by then you knew a good design or a bad design.
Sure.
And after 3 years, you're managing programmers and designers. And I had one programmer, "Oh, Brad, you don't get it. This is C++. I said, no, I get it. It's structured development. And he said, "Oh, I'll put in security and audit trail later." And I said, "There is no later."
You're never going to get a second chance.
The patient is open now.
Oh, wow. That's a good way to phrase that.
You know, third year, you're managing bigger groups. By fourth year, you're a manager. And you take on, I don't know, $250,000 projects. And then just year after year, more and more responsibilities. So after 20 years, I was managing $100 million projects with 220 people. Mm-hmm. And not just, about half my career was in higher ed. So my clients were the Ohio State University, Illinois, Michigan, Columbia, Vanderbilt, even Texas A&M, Cal State, never UT Austin, because they were so smart they never needed help.
Of course I didn't.
And so that's okay. And I just really enjoyed the higher ed practice, but I also had some years working with multinational corporations, and that was interesting as well. Mm-hmm. So what I loved about the firm, when I started, there were 40,000 people. When I left, there were 500,000 people.
Wow,
now there's
really?
700,000 people at Accenture. So Arthur Andersen became Andersen Consulting and then became Accenture. And I still stay in touch with many of my former colleagues, my people I worked with, my mentees, my bosses. And I'll talk about that when I get to the university, because I had to call on them to help me a couple of times. And then I happily retired at 51. Most partners go at 50. I was a partner for 10 years, and they want to get us out like the old pilots so the young people can come in and get paid less. And we remodeled the home. 18 months later, I got a call from the university. And it's the chief financial officer who I knew from prior work. And he goes, the president wants an IT strategy. He wants someone from outside who knows higher ed. That's you. Well, okay, hour a week pro bono. So this is in October, and I start going to the weekly meeting, and no agenda, lots of lip flapping, brilliant people in the room, PhDs, head of computer science, VP for this, VP for that, deans. And they heard no plan to do the plan. And it's like, okay, I talked to the financial officer, said, with all due respect, I'm not coming anymore. It's a waste of time. And And they didn't even pay for my dry cleaning or parking, and parking at the university. My gosh, I had a roll of quarters. And so the CFO says, well, what should we do? I said, look, you issued one RFP for a consultant in the last 40 years. It was 4 years ago. It was for an IT strategy. We, Accenture, and another firm bid. We were down selected. I gave a presentation in Stark Library on how to do an IT strategy. I'll go to offsite storage and get that proposal, and we'll follow that. Proven approach. Oh, by the way, you're going to pay me half time. And I need a strategy manager and 2 analysts. That's what we bid. And so now we're in January. And to be honest, the committee was really fractured. They were very distrustful of central IT. And usually central IT gets a bad rap anywhere, but this was a little over the top. And we talked to 300-400 people. We had focus groups with undergraduates, graduates, staff, faculty. We did surveys. We met with all the deans, all the VPs. And themes just started bubbling up. And the top theme was, we don't know how decisions get made regarding IT, how budgets are set, who even makes these decisions. And because IT is so distributed, there was a lot of frustration. And so our top recommendation was, you need IT governance. And in fact, there's a textbook out of Harvard Business School entitled IT Governance. And we slavishly borrowed the concepts from that.
Sure.
Private sector, public sector, it doesn't matter. You need strategic decision making, you need operational, and you need technical decision making. And we had none of that. We actually had 11 committees doing IT stuff. We called it the constellation of governance. And someone's boss would be on a committee, so there's gravitational pull. We had some where issues went in 10 years ago and never came out. Those were the black holes. And so the good news is everyone was so frustrated, they embraced the new governance structure. And so we had a group of IT leaders on campus who made technical decisions as a group together, best thinking to the table. We had faculty and students decide learning technologies that will be used. And we had business owners on the administrative side. And then we had the strategic committee, which was the president, the provost, CFO, 3 deans, big school, middle-sized school, small school. And they met quarterly, and we first showed them the plan. Then we showed them what the committees were recommendation, and then every quarter we would move the plan forward. Our first year, we implemented about 60% of the 5-year plan.
Wow.
Because we just ran down the field as fast as we could till someone tackled us. No one tackled us. And I was interim, but after a year, the president asked me to be the CIO, and that was a role I was in for 7 years after that.
Wow, that's great. So I got to ask you, so one of the beefs I've had with the institutions in general, higher ed, with regard to security, which I realize is not the same team necessarily, or might be a sub team or something. I don't know where this thinking came from originally, but it was sort of like, well, we can't like block things and like firewalls and stuff because there's some like freedom of speech thing that we have to enable. Like everyone has to be able to access anything at all times. And therefore we can't even stop viruses from propagating because there might be some researcher that needs to see this information from a, freedom of their education perspective. And so they basically had, there's like several universities I talked to, fully permeable networks, like just allow anything in and out. Have you heard this crazy thing?
I've heard it.
Okay.
Luckily, I did not experience it. Being a top 25 research university in the world with 14 high-performance computers and Defense Department research, and we took security very seriously.
Okay, well, that's good.
However, my first year, 2009, we didn't have all the laptops encrypted. And so technical group selected encryption software, and we went to the strategic leadership group, said we want to encrypt all the laptops. You have 12,000 laptops on campus. Every year, 1,000 go missing, lost, or stolen. We need to encrypt them. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Wow, that's
left
a lot.
in the airplane seat and everything.
That seems like a lot. You'd said 1 or 2. I'm like, well, that's a lot, but 1,000, jeez.
So then one of the deans said, I don't think we should do that because it'll slow the researchers down. And the president goes, well, you have encryption on your phone, don't you? And the guy goes, no. And the president goes, it's 4 numbers. Start encrypting. And then the president said, Brad, with all due respect, this is not an IT issue, an IT policy issue. It's a compliance issue. And I'm tabling this discussion, and we're moving it to the compliance committee, which, of course, unanimously voted for 100% laptop encryption.
Yeah, sure.
And then we got down to the last 52 faculty members who refused to do it. They're the ones who...
Yeah, they're generally invited to leave.
Well, they're the ones who had the whiteboards taken out of a new building and chalkboards put in.
Wow.
So, But the president, to his credit, threatened to turn them off the network. And that did it. And we had their picture on a deck of cards. It's the same 52 who resisted everything. But we finally got it done.
That's amazing. All right. So you've written a book, Spheres of Influence. Why don't you tell me, like, what made you want to start writing this book?
In my 40-year career, I've been very fortunate to have excellent mentors, really good bosses, especially at the firm, Accenture. And really part of the culture was grow the pie bigger. Coach the next Brad Englert, build bigger. And you could not get promoted or get a raise without not being a mentor and not fulfilling all your HR obligations. I mean, it's taken very seriously. And then training from the very beginning. My last year, 22 years, I'm a partner. I had to go teach a class in our training center in St. Charles, and it was on project management. 200 people from all over the world. It was a joy. So I actually went through 22 years of annual evaluations and reviewed what my bosses asked me to do and what they coached me to do, and I did it. And I was really impressed at how far they were thinking ahead, and their goal was to get me to partner, because being a partner will grow the pie for the firm. Mm-hmm. And they showed me how to get there. And then over the years, I've enjoyed, mentoring others and showing them the way. And as I got to the university, I did the same with my direct reports. And then as I retired from the university, I have at least 2 or 3 mentees every year that I help, but that's not very scalable. I can help 2 or 3 people, but I'd like to share my ideas with a wider audience. And that's where I got the idea of I should write a book.
Mm. Well, okay, you start the book, I think the first couple chapters are really about being a new employee and your boss, and that it sort of kind of generally follows the career path of someone, not necessarily you in general, but a lot of it, you got some personal anecdotes in there, but it starts talking about, okay, you're standing there in front of your boss for the very first time, or even before that, you're going to get hired,
Yep.
What is that process supposed to be compared to what it tends to be? Like what is the best way to approach that situation? Do you want to talk through that a little bit?
Yeah. Well, let's start with the boss, because everyone has a boss. Mm-hmm. And I think understanding their goals and aspirations is the first thing. And oftentimes people are scared to ask that question. But I find, especially when I was a boss, if someone asked me that, I would embrace the conversation, because we're all trying to work together towards an end. and having everyone on the same page was very helpful. And so,
but that implies the boss has the company's best interest in mind too.
True. And I do talk about a boss who prided himself as being a chess player, and he was 7 steps ahead of everybody. But he had 7 direct reports who had no clue where he was headed. And it was so frustrating and really not in the best interest of the organization or us, because if we knew where he was headed, we could help him get there. And it was, and it never got resolved. So for his tenure, luckily he went on to other places, but
part of his big chess game.
yeah, and but you have to try.
Yeah, I've certainly run into a number of bosses who I could not for the life of me tell where they were going. Like, what is this person want out of their career? And I think some of it is they truly don't know either.
Some don't.
They're just kind of winging it.
But in some industries like consulting, the boss has sales quotas, and
sure,
I had a boss who said every year that my sales quota is like a bulldog, and every year it gets bigger and it wants more. And so I knew what a partner's sales goals were, and I'm a senior manager. I know if I can contribute to that overall number, that'll help him and help me.
Yeah, I think in general, you can do the other way around where you can just say, look, I don't know what your goals are. I don't need to know necessarily, but I will always have your back. So if there's ever any conflicts between you and me, they will not make it to a meeting. It'll make it just between you and me. If I see a way to protect you from something that's going to come down the pipe, I will try to get in front of it before that happens. If you need reports done in a very particular way that will help you get your job done, just let me know in what way. Otherwise, I'm going to do the best job I can, and we'll figure out what happens on the other side. And
you have to be sensitive to style. Some people like to read. Some just want it verbal. And I had a boss who didn't like to read. So anything sensitive, I would get on his calendar and we would sit down and talk it through. In person, he was quite open. But if you tried to do that on an email or text, no, he'd kill you.
Yeah, I realized one of my bosses, this is fairly early in my career, he did not trust me even a little bit when we were starting off. This young hacker kid, he's going to mess with stuff. And so I submitted a product requirements document to him back when that was a thing. And he did not read a single word of it. He only looked at the page count. And it was the same page count as the template. You're supposed to beef it up and have some words in there. And I'm like, and basically the entire requirement was fix this piece of JavaScript so I was not able to do this, and there's a link. So it was only 3 lines total. The entire product requirements document was very, very short. And so he emails me. He's like, what the hell is this document? What is this? This is garbage. He did not read it, did not open it, did not read it, just, saw the page count. And I'm like, did you actually click the link? And there was about a 5-minute pause before I get an email back. It's like, okay, it's been approved. Because if you click that link, really bad things happen. And so to some degree, it's those little proof points, and then suddenly the gates are open.
Now he had the courage to follow through and say, click on the link.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't, they're scared, and you shouldn't be.
Right. It's that kind of conversation where he just left me alone at that point.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I've had a lot of bosses like that. They're very micromanagey at first. You give them that one big piece of proof point, no, I got this. Unless you need me to do something outside the norm. I think that matters to bosses.
Well, it's trust.
They can take their hands off the wheel with you.
Yeah, you have to earn their trust.
Yeah. Another
thing that I find people early in their careers do or don't do is they get themselves on lists. So take, for example, sending a bill to your client and collecting money. You need to do that on a timely basis. If you don't, you end up on a list. And because basically you're being charged interest by the firm for that. And then your boss shows up on a list. So Don't do that. Another one is performance evaluations done on time. Get them done on time.
Yeah.
Get them done early. Don't be on a list of late performance evaluations.
Right.
What messages are you sending that your people don't matter?
Yeah.
Expense account, time reports, never late.
Interesting.
22 years, never late. It's unnecessary.
So I haven't heard that version of that, but I've certainly heard the starting meetings late thing.
Oh.
I I have a personal beef with that one in particular because it's like a trickle down effect. Like you're just 5 minutes late or whatever, and you're basically telling this group of people, call it 10 people or something, that 5 minutes of your time wasted is best for me. And now you multiply that out, that's 50 minutes of company time blown off. And then the next time they're like, oh, well, I just don't even need to show up. So they come late. Right. And now it's this trickle effect where it's like, well, that's the culture here, is that we're all late to things.
Snowballs.
Yeah. And now you're wasting hundreds or thousands of man hours working on this.
Lack of discipline.
Yeah.
So I would always start the meetings on time.
Yeah.
So 8 years at the university, I always started them on time. If one of my direct reports was late, I assumed they had a good reason, but I didn't keep 6 people waiting for them.
Right. Yeah, or minimum dismiss them. Like we're not going to have this meeting until this other person arrives.
Well, what they learned is that I did start them on time, and they would miss what we talked about. And obviously, the top agenda items are the most important.
Sure.
So you just have to walk the walk.
Interesting. So one of the things you mentioned in the book was not making a decision necessarily in the meeting. The Texas two-step, I think, is what you referred to it as. Yeah. Can you get into that a little bit?
Well, I have Texas two-step. So this was a boss who hated making a decision on the spot. And so he would just get all nervous and so I realized I just need to go in with one step and say, hey, just want your feedback. Got some thoughts here. What do you think? No decision needed today. Then he'd relax. And then I come back the next week and said, well, per what we talked about, here's what I think we should do.
My last email.
And that was the two-step. And he went to another university as CFO, and I talked to the CIO there, and I said, Laura, Texas two-step. It works every time. And it worked. It worked for him. I have another one, which was deliberate foot dragging. Sometimes you don't need to rush in and make a decision. And often my direct reports would come in and there's something really urgent. And I'd say, well, slow down. Let's understand what the situation is. And a couple of them being type A personalities have blown past the problem. They're all into solutions. And let's think about it. There's no hurry here. It took us 40 years to get this way. What's another day? And so their feedback to me is they appreciated when I'd slowed them down and asked them to think about it and didn't put pressure on. And one time I was on vacation, I had someone filling in interim. I don't check email, don't check voicemail. I was in Mongolia or someplace. And, but of course I'm sneaking a peek at the email and I see an issue come in. And by the time I got back, it had resolved itself by something outside our organization. So it's like sometimes you don't need to do anything.
Yeah, I've certainly encountered that as well. But what about when it's truly an emergency? I mean, how do you, that kind of boss is not particularly well suited for emergency situations. It sounds like I need an immediate decision because people's lives are at stake, or the company's revenue is dropping precipitously, or whatever.
Well, at the university, it wasn't a matter of if, it was when something bad was going to happen. And in my 8 years, we had a bomb scare, we had a shooting, a murder, and we had a power outage. We actually generated our own power, backed up by the power company. It had not gone out in 20 years. We had a power outage. Well, our data center has backup generators and everything.
Sure.
But my answer is we anticipate outages, we anticipate public safety events, and then we work with our peers in the organization, and we basically practice how we'll deal with bad situations.
So you're saying the no two-step required because you'd already made these decisions long ago.
Yeah, every year we'd come up with different scenarios: ice storm, cyber attack, power outage, and then with public safety in the room and our team in the room, we would basically tabletop exercise how we would deal with it. The other thing is we had consistent incident reporting procedures. So no matter what happened, messages went out through multi-channels. So, if you're in the basement and can't get a cell thing, you get reverse dialing. There are all sorts, probably 8 different ways we could communicate. But every year we would practice, and we would put someone to be the incident commander in charge. They didn't know it before we started. So, okay, you're the incident commander. And oh, by the way, the network guy is out, so he's not available. And it's a network issue. Let's go. And just building those muscles. And one time, the bomb scare, I'm outside on the mall, and it's like I don't have my incident procedure manual. It's on my desk. I have one in my backpack, but I didn't have my backpack. And it's like I'm in the mall, everyone's out of the buildings, but the call went out. We have standard emergency call we get on. So the text went out. Within a minute, we were all on the call, along with public safety, and we worked it basically from the mall. So practice, you have to anticipate and practice.
Well, that certainly works in the kind of emergencies you prepared for, but there's also the other kind, you know what I mean? Like cyber attack is certainly something you can sort of prepare for, but other things occur, like, hey, this ERP system just exploded on us or something, or or hey, someone forgot to pay the bill and now we just don't have this service that's super critical, or a vendor went out of business. You can't necessarily anticipate every variant of all those things happening.
True. That's true.
So, do you have a strategy for working with that two-step guy who, because I refer to people as either wartime or peacetime, whatever. So that guy seems more like a peacetime, so it's when things are gentle and, the waves are, just a foot tall and, it's nice at the beach. That's the kind of guy you want on your side.
Whenever there was a crisis, planned or unplanned, unplanned, we would get on the call. So no matter where my direct reports were, they were on the call, including the security people. So the InfoSec group is actually separate from the IT group as a separation of duties. I actually like that because I want them to hold me accountable as much as anyone else. And I've seen places where the CISO reports to the CIO. I don't like that. I would prefer the arm's distance.
Out of curiosity, where would you prefer? 'Cause I've seen him report to all kinds of groups, like a CFO is another one that I've seen that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I've seen CFO and I've seen compliance officer, which are usually C-level positions.
Baby C, though. Not full C, not a capital C. Compliance, they don't get the same respect as anybody else. They're
the compliance officer?
Yeah, no.
Oh, that's true. I was thinking that. I said CFO and compliance.
Oh, CFO. They're full word. They're real. That's a real one. No compliance. No. So I generally think that the strategy I take with bosses is just make sure that they know that if we're in the trenches, my back is to their back. Like I've got them. And so as much as possible, you have to kind of demonstrate that as things are going. Like any rumor mill stuff that might impact us, like I don't care if it makes me look bad. It's got to go to them first. So they're going to be able to get in front of it. But they see that I'm constantly helping them out in their decision-making process. So how do you, like when you're very first starting, and like you don't really know these people, right? Mm-hmm. You don't necessarily have a lot of context for how they operate. Like how do you start engage that conversation and get them thinking along the path that you're really on their side? Or is that purely a trust is earned over time sort of situation?
Yes, but no one likes being surprised. So I think erring on the side of over communicating, especially if it's a crisis or, the phones are out, you want to let your boss know first.
Well, yeah, but there's the other version of that where it's like there's a certain amount of tension you can take off the situation by taking the blast radius and then saying, look, I didn't want you in the room when this went off. So I took the brunt of it, and now you get like this minor ripple compared to if I just shoved you in that same meeting.
Well, that's true.
So there's sort of like a middle ground there, I think. It depends on the situation, obviously.
Right.
But
well, there's a quote in the book, Robert Vlasic, who created Vlasic Pickle Company, and he goes, I want good news fast and bad news faster.
Right?
Yeah.
Right. Well, it's true, but, to some extent, some of that bad news just doesn't need to reach their ears at all because it's just a waste of their valuable time. I'd rather just detonate it myself and land on the grenade.
You don't want to cry wolf.
Yeah. Right. Well, I mean, it might be a real issue, but I'll take care of it. And then over drinks one day, I'm like, oh, you should have heard this crazy thing. Like, why didn't you tell me? You didn't need to be there, man. Just relax. Actually, I have a question about that. Do you think it's good to have that kind of familial relationship with your employees, or is that absolutely verboten? Where you go out and have drinks and like invite them to your birthday party or whatever.
Well, I'm a big believer in breaking bread together. You don't have to buy their lunch, but everyone likes to eat lunch, and I would consciously, intentionally have lunch with my direct reports.
That's not quite what I was saying, sir. So imagine, let's go, the ball game's on. Like, are we going to go drinking together and hang out on the weekends?
Probably not.
Okay, probably not. And what's the rationale for that from your perspective?
Well, I want to keep the relationship on a professional level, and I think there needs to be, some space. Do I go to their weddings when invited? Of course. Do I go to the funerals? All of them. Mm-hmm. But I going for drinks, rarely.
Okay.
Maybe if it's a celebration. We just completed the voice over IP system, 2-year project, 21,000 phones. Look, let's go have pizza and beer. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would do that.
Okay. All right. You hear that, Chris? We're not hanging out anymore. You're going to have to find some other friends.
Yeah, find another producer too while you're at it.
So but there is a bidirectionality in terms of what needs to be done. So I think this is kind of where we switch from it being like all on the employee, so like as a boss, I probably shouldn't be, doing some crazy party or something with my employees. Where does the boss's job really begin in terms of their responsibilities? Like what should a good boss be saying and boundaries should they be placing like early on in their relationship with these employees?
Well, when you take over an organization and you meet your direct reports for the first time, it's a great opportunity to understand what they think is working well, what they think is not working well, ask what their aspirations are, really learn what's working, what's not working. And if you can make some quick fixes, in the first 90 days, that builds some momentum. As a boss, you need to use your words. You need to communicate. And, there are formal processes for that, but they're informal processes. And, I think waiting once a year to give feedback is ridiculous. I try to give feedback when it happens.
Mm-hmm.
Chris, that was a great meeting today. You took a leadership role. The dean called me over and said, "You're top notch. Thank you."
Mm-hmm. Chris is top notch.
Yep.
Absolutely is.
Thank you very much.
Is another Chris.
Oh, no, not this Chris. Got it. That makes more sense.
Oh, come on.
Okay, so when, as an employee, do you think it's the right time to go to your boss? Because, I mean, I've had all kinds of employees. Some are just like super needy. They're talking to you all the time, like 5 meetings a week, like personal one-on-one meetings to talk about the things that are happening. And others are like, you might see them in the hallway once a month and you're like, oh, that's right, you still work here, but they're in their lane, they're doing their thing. They don't really need to like interact with you because they're so efficient and their job is well defined. It's not like there's not a lot of variability in there. So where like how much feedback should an employee be creating up to their boss?
Well, with my direct reports, I would have a scheduled cadence of one-on-one meetings.
Once a week or?
For my direct reports, once a week.
Mm-hmm.
For more peers, like the chief information security officer or the wide area network person, maybe once a month.
Mm-hmm.
But for my direct reports, it would be weekly. With my boss, it would be weekly. And I would meet in their office space. Why would I do that? I want to show the flag. I want to walk through so their team sees me every week and that I respectfully are meeting with their team leader in their office.
That's clever.
Mm. And I'm not having them, come to the mountain and, toil away across.
You also get your steps in,
But I just love that because you run into people.
Sure.
And you say hi and you ask what you're working on, Mm-hmm. And, I had 7 direct reports. Well, they were maybe half an hour meetings. They weren't long, but I would ask them 1-page status report, top, what are your issues? And, not verbology about day-to-day activities. I trust you're doing that, but
Mm-hmm.
what can I help you with? What are you needing help with? Sometimes it's with a peer. And then my question is, well, what did they say when you talked to them? And of course they hadn't talked to them.
Mm-hmm.
I said, well, I think you should talk to them.
Mm-hmm.
If that doesn't work, let's all 3 get together. But I found that cadence, you're not letting things fester too long.
But okay, so what about the other way around? What about the employee talking to you as the boss? What cadence should they? I mean, once a week is great, but what if they want to talk to you 3 times a day or 10 times a day or whatever? Like, you've never had this? You never had one of these like over communicators?
No.
Really?
I must be blessed.
Oh, you are blessed, my friend. Wow. When it happens, so my reaction to that is, can you get all of these things all just in one email, or can we get one call together instead of these call after call after call after call?
Sure.
And I think some of it is they're worried that I'm upset with them. I'm like not upset, but like you're using a ton of time and you're interrupting a bunch of other things that are happening. So I'm not upset at that you have a problem or need solutions. I'm upset that it's happening at such a fast cadence that I can't really get much else done other than deal with you. And generally these employees, unfortunately, also are not super qualified. And I've inherited them through some mechanism that I did not really, I would not have hired this person for this, position. And so, my initial stance on that is, can I manage them up? Right? Can I get them to the point where they actually can handle these problems?
You got to give them a chance.
Yeah. But then, some of them really just are not qualified. Like there's just no way to get them to where they need to be in any timely manner. So then, got to find a way to manage them out, which I'm not a super huge fan of doing. I don't know.
Well, I learned later in my career to take action quicker than I did earlier in my career,
Mm-hmm.
especially if you have someone who's dishonest.
Mm.
And I had 3 situations where direct reports were dishonest. And
In what way? Like stealing or
taking
credit or what?
we were inherited an organization, a $32 million construction project, and my direct report would not give me any budget information. And, I'm responsible for the organization, so I think I need to know budget to actual and et cetera. And so I got my best project manager, who I nicknamed Red Adair, because she could fix any blowout project, and she fixed probably 5 or 6 of them. And at the end, I gave her a poster of Hellfighters, the movie, because at first she didn't know who Red Adair was, and she thought I was, she better look him up, make sure. It's like, no, Linda, this is good.
Yeah.
You're a hero.
Yeah.
But I said, go find out what the numbers are. So she goes, and about a month later, she prized the numbers out of him, but he told her not to give me the numbers. How can she not do that?
Right.
I directed her to do it.
Yeah.
So we had a little chat, and I let him go. And it was before the winter holidays. I don't think I've ever let someone go before the winter holidays, but it was just, I couldn't.
It was egregious.
It was too risky. Well, it turns out that there were numerous egregious problems with the construction project. Too many to bore you with now, but I mean, bad. And so thank goodness I took action quickly.
So where there's smoke, there's fire in this case, you think?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And turns out later I learned that he was going to wait me out. Because remember, I started for a year, and then he figured I'd be bye-bye. But then the president made me CIO. It's like, I'm not going anywhere. And I had another person direct report who was into gossip, and which is the opposite of me. I don't have time for that. And so there was some gossip between her and a woman in finance about a layoff of one of her peers, which, totally inappropriate. So she sends me this email, the email that was the source of the gossip. And I looked at it. I thought, I better have my CISO pull the email. She had altered the email she gave me.
Oh, my gosh.
And it's like, are you kidding me?
Oh.
Because, I had just had this instinct that something wasn't right. And she let herself go to another job. I didn't have to do anything.
I see. She knew the jig was up.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's talk about what makes a good employee instead of the bad. So I think a pretty good chunk, kind of midway through the book, I would say somewhere, was you talking about grit.
Yep.
So give me that one.
There's a book by Angela Duckworth called Grit, and she did some research on what makes people successful. And she looked at a number of occupations and whatever, and it wasn't necessarily a GPA, but it was the determination to achieve the goal, combined with other skills and traits. I don't sing well, so I can't grit myself into being an opera singer. But there are times when, you're in a tough project and you just got to gut it out. And I had managers who are really good at just persevering. one of my best managers was an Aggie engineer, and she goes, Brad, I have the wrong skill for the degree for this job. I need a psychology degree. And I said, you are absolutely right. Come down to my office. And prior boss had given me this Vince Lombardi quote that basically says, just keep fighting. It's all about grit.
Uh-huh.
And I said, I know you're a big football fan. I'm deeding this to you. Because she just would not quit. She just had that tenacious ability to get things done. And, I think sometimes people quit and they just don't follow through. Now, there's downside of this. So early in my career, I had a boss say, Brad, you're tireless. You just keep working. However, you're setting a bad example for all your employees, so stop it.
That's funny.
And they didn't want me to be a bad role model.
Sure.
And I thought, well, that's pretty cool.
Yeah,
And it was like, I loved what I was doing. But you can overdo it.
Mm-hmm. Out of curiosity, are you familiar with this term, soft quitting or whatever, or quiet quitting?
Yeah.
Have you heard this?
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious to hear what you think about it. Seems like it's a relatively new phenomenon about people really not quitting, but then, they're still taking a paycheck, and from their perspective, they're saying something like, well, you're forcing me to work on this thing. I don't want to do it. And you're making these huge amount of profits and you're exploiting the working class, or, it's this thing. Out of curiosity, what do you think about it?
Well, as a supervisor, it's my responsibility to make sure the work's getting done. If it's not getting done, it's my responsibility to make a change.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it's fair to them either. It's like, go get another job.
Mm-hmm. Oh, they do. They get 2 jobs. They
I've heard of that.
They quiet quit multiple.
I've had several people quit, and it was okay because it was the right thing for them. And I'd always appreciated dialogue before you quit. So I had this outstanding network engineer, and he got an offer from a startup, big money, dry cleaning, food. He had a young family. So he goes, Brad, I just got to do this. I think some equity was thrown in, or warrants at least. And I said, well, look, we don't say this for everybody, but if you get there and you don't like it, you can come back. And 2 weeks later, we get an email. He sends it to his director, my direct report. Can I come back? He said it was chaos. And the reason they fed me because I could never leave. And who needs dry cleaning? I never went home.
Mm.
So, and
it was the culture he missed. Sounds like.
And because one thing you can promise at a university is balance. I want 8 solid hours and then leave.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I compete with salary. And so he's still there. He came back.
Oh, wow. All right. Well, so I've got a couple of stories. I'd like to hear your take on it first, though. Why should, or when do you know when it's time to leave?
That's a good one.
You surely left positions with yourself, so.
Yeah. Well, when you don't have the support of your boss, when you don't have the resources you need to do the job, those would be kind of the 2 biggest ones. And I've had both those at one time, and I left because it was untenable. So the new boss comes in and wondered why we're doing this cloud HR payroll system. Why are we doing this? And no case for change was made. And I said, well, sir, actually, 2 years ago, we wrote a master plan to replace all the administrative systems. And the first chapter is entitled A Case for Change.
Mm-hmm.
And it was unanimously endorsed by the leadership of the university. And just because you did not know that does not mean it didn't happen. And he said, oh, it wasn't a real case for change. He hadn't even read it. And his theory, he said later, was he thought it was a technology case for change. Well, it was. We had a mainframe, for God's sake.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, time to move to the cloud, duh.
Mm-hmm.
But it's let's modernize business processes that were codified in 1970 and get to the real world.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that was the major emphasis. Let's modernize the business process, not technology. That was just the way to get there.
Mm-hmm. And so you were like, I'm out?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I gave my notice, and then I said, look, I'll hang around till you get a replacement. Well, that was a mistake, because higher ed works in slow and mysterious ways. And so I even gave him, like, here are job postings for the last 5 CIO jobs, because we all get invited. You know, the top 40 R1 CIOs get asked for everything, to apply for everything. So a month goes by, nothing. And so I just said, 2 weeks, I'm out of here.
Mm-hmm.
It was actually St. Patrick's Day that
Oh, wow.
my last day.
So
And
your
so I had
anniversary.
I did have some folks over to the house for beers.
That's different. On the way out there.
Yeah.
That's fine. Okay. I have two anecdotes. One was this woman I worked for. It was a very brief stint of working for this woman. I was finding all these vulnerabilities in this web app that we were developing, and so she wanted to see what I was doing. So I went in her office and I showed it to her on her computer. And she's like, well, can you make, and how it worked is you have to hit a specific URL, and that payload would be in the URL. And she's like, well, can you make people stop doing that? I'm like, doing what exactly? She's like, typing in their URL bar. She didn't say URL bar, typing up there in that thing. And what I realized she was asking was, can you make it so people can't type at all in the URL bar? Like, can't enter any data in. And there is a way to create a pop-up that has that disabled, especially back then. But that didn't stop a hacker from doing it. Mm-hmm. And I'm looking at her, and I just realized how big a distance there was in terms of understanding how the internet works, where she really didn't actually know what that bar even was. And I'm like, I have to leave this place. I cannot work for this woman. She's like not at all ready to manage me. Like I'm just wildly way past her already. I need somebody to look up to in some way, right? Something interesting. So that was bad. And then the second one was, it was another woman, although I've had really great female bosses, so this is nothing saying bad about them. But it happened to be another woman, and she came from computer support. And so her whole, career path was, 20-year-old kids or whatever, like this is what they're doing instead of college, churn and burn, like they don't show up to work. Who cares? You got 20 more on the bench, or you can hire that day, they'll happily come in, and half of them are drunk or high or whatever. And she's like, just massive turnover. And then she's promoted into this position where she's above actual experts in our field. We're all like dedicated, been doing this for at least a decade or more. And she got in there, and, minor conflicts would happen, and she's ready to start dumping them. Yeah. I mean, minor conflicts, like what is this woman doing? Like, she's just absolutely just burning this place to the ground. And I almost left. Thankfully, she was managed out because they realized she was such a bad culture fit for the team. Like, we're all looking at each other like, how impossible it would be to find that person again. Like, there's like 5 people in the world who know what that person does. And when I left, it took them, I think, about 5 years or so to replace me, something like that. With 2 people, though. It took them 2 people to find just my replacement, and they messed it up like really bad. Like it was a catastrophe. So it just kind of gives you some context. Like, like the delta between what the team needed and where she was so astronomical. You know, like you need someone to come in and just like baby us. Like, just what do you guys need? You need me to go like pound on that guy over there for you because you can't get what you need. Like, we didn't really need a manager. We just needed pressure outwards to give us cover for what we were working on because it was so complicated. So I think those are, I mean, they're very different situations. One was like, I needed somebody to like mentor me and help me get, move in my career. And the other one was like, I don't need you to talk to me at all. Like, just, be the linesman if you're going to use
I'm glad they observed what happened
with the second one. Yeah. I think they got a lot of complaints about her. Like the entire team was confused. Like, what, you think you can just get rid of these people? Like what like we can't do their job. They are the one person who knows how to do that.
Well, I've made hiring mistakes in the past. So I had one director who looked great on paper and increasingly bigger roles and responsibilities, top-notch universities. She talked a great game, interview great, and I hired her, and I learned over time she was really good at managing up, but micromanaged down, and was not a team player with the other of my direct reports. And we had a big project moving a lot of stuff to the cloud, problem with this global vendor. And after migrating about 4,000 of our customers to the cloud, we found there were just all these errors. And we even did dog fooding, Google, where we tried it internally first, but we quit dog fooding early. And it's like she would not stop. And so finally, we're on a conference call with the global vendor, and their data center was down for half a day. I mean, who does that? This is a global vendor. I have other global vendors. Never happens. And they're down for half a day. And then I have a bug where things are off 6 hours on a calendar. So we're on this conference call with the data center people, and they're, hey, Fred, how you doing, Ralph? Oh, great, Joe. And I said, excuse me, we're dying here. And by now I'm standing up and kind of yelling at the speakerphone with everyone around. She's deer in the headlights.
Right.
And I said, guys, first of all, data center outages are unacceptable. You've had 2 now, unexplained and not warned. You didn't tell us. 2, this time zone issue. Oh, well, the server is set on Greenwich Mean Time, and since it's no longer in your data center, it doesn't know what time it is there. I said, okay, when will you fix that? Figuring millions of lines of code, what could possibly go wrong? Right. Server, client. 12 weeks. 12 weeks. And I said, well, you know what? Effective immediately, we're halting all migrations. And then you could hear a pin drop. And it's like, and we halted this multi-million-dollar project. The Red Adair got assigned to help the direct report, who was basically frozen by that point. And it was 4th of July. I had a vacation scheduled with my family going to Portland to see some friends. And I was going to cancel it because of this debacle. I thought, well, I just halted the project, so I'm going to Portland. So I'm sitting there, Cannon Beach condo, nice Cabernet from Oregon, looking out at the sea with my wife and my sons. And
this sounds nice.
And I thought, I need to get to the highest level of that firm. I'm going to call the guy who hired me at Accenture, who's on the executive committee of Accenture, and another guy I work for who's also on the executive committee at Accenture, and get some help. So I think I sent an email or something. Your alma mater needs help, please. And I got a call from the guy who hired me. He's serving on a corporate board with a senior VP from this company. He's the chair of the board. I'll talk to her. So Monday morning, I'm back, and my former boss lives in Florida. So I'm seeing this heat-seeking missile coursing across the U.S. And then when it hits the West Coast, kaboom! I got the call at 10 a.m.
Uh-huh.
And I said, okay, we have a 5-alarm fire, and you guys are giving us a 1-alarm response. And neither you nor me need to be in the newspapers over this. And she goes, we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. So back to my director. She exited. I hired a new director who was top-notch from industry. Red Adair saved the day once again. And they sent their engineers 5 times over this time frame because there were known incompatibilities with Apple. Well, on a campus that has 300,000 devices every day hook into the
There's
network.
a couple Apples on there.
60%. 60%. And their engineers came back 5 times. Now, these people have never been outside. They've never seen a customer in the wild. And I said, I need all 5 of you to go sit with my executive assistant and watch her do calendaring. And they were like opossums with their big eyes bugged out. And to the credit of the head engineer who came with them, he just committed to get it done. It took us a year, but knocked out all the issues. Hired a different firm to help us implement. And it was the quietest, smoothest go live. We took everyone out for tacos to celebrate. The engineers, because they get their food fed under doors, So we took them outside,
as it should be,
and went to the taco bar, and we just laughed, and we had so much fun, and it was so hard, but I made a bad hire. And one of my mistakes was I didn't call the CIO and ask for a reference. And, I'm in the job world for 35 years. I don't do the most basic thing. And I see him at a conference because the top 40 R1 CIOs get together once a year. And basically we all agree you can't do anything with the computer science department. Let them go. Let them go. Their own email server? Fine. But, we just got, he asked me, why didn't you call me? And I said, well, I just screwed up.
What would he have said, did you think?
Oh, he would have warned me.
Not really.
He said that. He would have. But it's like, you're in the, stuff coming and going. And, I missed it.
All right. I wanted to ask you about, so the company has goals, right? Whatever the company goals are, and unfortunately many companies are just profit driven. They don't have any other altruistic motives, but whatever. At least you can say, like, here's a company goal. We have to release XYZ product by this time. So we make these goal projections or whatever. So we make our numbers, which is a pretty simple thing to say I'm going to help with, right? A lot of people don't understand that, but let's say you can figure out this very simple math. We need to stay in business so that I have a check coming in every couple of weeks or whatever. What about using it as sort of a defense against toxic personalities inside the company? So, you have you have these people come in with these weird objectives. They're like, they have their own personal thing. I'm just trying to get promoted, you know, and in situations that are really not appropriate, or even, you know, submarining the company in the process to get there. You know, like this will make me look good to, you know, whoever the next hiring manager is. I don't give a crap about what it does to the company. Like I've seen a lot of products go live that I would just never in a million years recommend the way this went out, but it made them look good because they have a check mark that they launched this crazy thing, and, you know, then they're gone, you know, and we're stuck with this horrible thing that needs to be implemented forever because, you know, there's a word that I just sort of came up with recently. It's sort of like technical debt, but I call it echo debt, where it's sort of like this reverberation of debt where you launch something, customers start using it, you want to change it too late. Like now they start implementing APIs off of it and their business processes are all wound up in it. And you're like, this whole thing needs to go. It's like, I mean, that is an enormous amount of work, or I need to change it. Yeah, but you can't, you know, I want to change this thing from a number into a string. It's like, well, I can't do math on strings, so you can't. And like, you know, something very simple could just spiral out of control and echo back and forth and continuing to add. I mean, it's ultimately technical debt, but it's sort of implemented in such a way that customers are the reason you can't unwind the debt.
Sure.
And so these toxic personalities are oftentimes the progenitors of this echo debt that I'm talking about. So what do you think?
You have bad people in the workplace. You have dishonest people.
Yeah.
And in my book, I talk about things to look out for dishonest people. Because I think I said the only thing I regret is trusting people I shouldn't have trusted. And then someone said, well, how do you know?
Yeah, how do you know?
Well, it's false niceness, never being accountable for anything. Their people are always good and your people are always bad. Never, lack of empathy. So I had this peer who was evil. He actually, so I was a new guy in the organization. He was there for 13 years, boss, and he worked together for 13 years. I'm the new guy. So I start getting these emails that were not written by my boss. My boss sent text emails, short, abrupt, no subject matter. And then I get this cloud of words email. And of course, I look in the calendar and I see 1 minute after those two meet, I get this cloud of word email from the boss. Well, obviously he wrote the email. Right. And yes, he didn't know how to write very well. And opining on my organization, my people, my budget, and frankly had no qualifications to do so, but they had that 13-year relationship. So I go meet with my boss, and I take out a piece of paper, and I draw 3 circles and put eyes and mouth on it. And then I put headsets on all 3 and link them with coils. And I said, okay, boss, you're the head coach in the middle. Frank is the offensive coordinator you worked with for 13 years. A lot of trust, blah, blah, blah. I'm the new guy, the defensive coordinator. When I get orders through your headset from Frank, then you don't need me anymore. So either hold him accountable for offense, me accountable for defense, or I'm quitting.
Yeah.
In a respectful way. It's like, I can't work like that. And he thanked me for the honest communication. Yeah, I was going to quit because how can I work like that? This first year, and backed off, gave me some room to. Now, Fred tried all sorts of nefarious other things, but.
Of course, his name is Fred. Fred.
I mean, Frank.
Oh, Frank. Oh, obviously, Frank. All right. So what about credit? Deserving it, needing it, offering it? Or
be generous with offering it. Be generous. I mean, especially when you have a team that's firing on all cylinders and delivering. And, I'm a big believer in celebrations. And, we have each at the university, these projects would take 2 years. When you're moving 52,000 students to a new learning management platform, from a buggy, horrible on-prem to a beautiful new cloud-based, cutting edge, it takes 2 years. When we finished that, an email came in from all the colleges and schools to the president, copying me and the vice provost who worked together to implement. And I just closed my eyes. It's like, oh my God, this is going to be horrible. They're complaining to the president because, you're affecting 4,000 faculty and 52,000 students. What could possibly go wrong? Who'd have no opinions, of course.
Obviously.
And it was the most glowing, thankful email that the vice provost and I ever read. I mean, it teared up because they appreciated the way both organizations worked together to be so responsive to all the needs out there. And we worked with the vendor because it was a new company. They changed their product to help us because we're at scale. Many other universities have followed us. This was 10 years ago. They just were really appreciative. So we had a celebration, and we invited all those guys. There are 25 of them. We went to the bowling alley on campus. We had pizza. I don't think we had beer. But we just had a joyous celebration with our staff and with the people out there in the trenches and the students and faculty who picked the learning management system. They were there. You just have to celebrate and be thankful.
Okay. So what about people who need credit, or you needing credit? I mean, how do you feel about that as an employee? Like, because I've seen situations where someone did the work, the other person needs the credit for the work. They crave it. They're gonna step on the other person to get it. They got to be in every meeting, even though they don't provide any value, because they know this is going to be a good one for their resume or whatever.
That's a tough one. I had a boss. I was working full time when I went to graduate school, and it was in the federal government, and I was the payroll officer, and a peer of mine was the personnel officer, and we reported to the boss who. We were her two direct reports. And each year they gave out merit pay. And that year, my boss got merit pay. And I'm the payroll guy, so I know the rules of merit pay. It needs to be merit-based.
Ideally.
And so I asked her.
Apparently it doesn't need it.
I said, okay. You took the numbers from the personnel woman and payroll and rolled them up to get credit, and you got merit pay. Why didn't we get merit pay since our numbers are what you used? And she says, well, Brad, it's just not your year for merit pay. That was my last year.
If you'd stuck it out, next year would have been your year. I don't know what you're doing leaving so
maybe
early.
5-10 years later. But it was like, how unfair was that?
Yeah, no kidding. All right. Well, I'm kind of curious about the general take on politics within companies. So I have seen some people who are my peers, I've worked with them in other companies, who are they just excel at politics. They're just really... They're deft at writing decks and talking to people in a way that just lowers their blood pressure and gets them through situations in which this is just a massive cluster and everyone involved is a bad actor, more or less. Like really, like it's a pretty bad situation, multiple teams misbehaving and, causing all kinds of problems. Where I walk in there and I just want to clean house. I just want to like dump the whole group, or minimum like get them a better set of managers who are going to, start flogging them to get them to do the right thing.
Yeah. Hold them accountable.
Yeah. But it seems like I'm thinking one guy in particular. He's a good friend of mine. He's able to walk in those environments and not sweat it at all. It's like he's like, it's duck and just water just coming right off of him. He's just zero stress about the situation and he just navigates it well. I'm not saying that he solves the problem. I'm not saying that like the company's better off having had him in the room, but I am saying he seems completely unworried about being there in that situation where I'm just, my hackles are up like, oh, why aren't we going faster? Why aren't we getting this fixed? And like, who's in charge here?
Yeah. Well, I find that the best colleagues and people working for you and are people who give a damn.
Mm-hmm.
And I talk about genuinely care for their success. And to me, that's a predictor of success. So when I got to the university, I met with this faculty member, 40 years, electrical engineer, crusty old guy. I worked with him on a strategy project 15 years earlier. We created or upgraded the wide area network for Texas. And I said, okay, give me some advice. He goes, get out of the office and tell them you give a damn.
That's good advice.
And I did that.
Yeah.
And so I created a network of all the assistant deans who have IT reporting to them because they have IT blowing smoke up their ass every day.
Mm-hmm.
And I would create that network so they could, whenever they had a question or anything, they could ask me, does this sound right? Is this, or I'd give them a heads up, this project's coming, we're going to irritate everybody by changing everyone's phone to voice over IP. So, but it won't happen for 6 months. And built that network, and I would meet with them about every 6 weeks. And then I asked all my direct reports to do the same. So they connected with 7 to 10 people every 6 to 8 weeks. And we just created this network.
Mm.
And it was like our nervous system. And it would pick up good news, hey, love Sarah. She did a great job. Bad news, this guy over here was rude,
Mm-hmm.
Rumors. I heard that you don't have enough diesel in the generators for the data center. They run on natural gas. Good rumor, but it wasn't true. And then the other data center
maybe it was true. You should have had some diesel nearby. You never know. We might need it.
But we just had this symbiotic nerve system through a $3 billion organization that built trust. I had one of my direct reports. I said, you need to go talk to Sally. So Sally hates us. I said, I know. Her department chair hates us. I know. You need to go meet with her every 6 weeks. And she thought I was insane. Why am I asking her to do this? And she told me this story just the other day, and it's in the book. And she goes, over time, as we started to improve, Sally started trusting us more. And after about 6 months, the department chair was not actively throwing rocks anymore. And by a year, she was an advocate.
Mm.
And the chair was an advocate. And I still talk to him. So, I think you have to be intentional about letting people know you care and you genuinely do care for their success. And they appreciate that.
I agree. What about getting executive buy-in? Because there's, as you said, in this case, the chair was throwing rocks, but there's a whole bunch of examples of where, there's like 5 different teams that actually need to be involved in any one project usually. I mean, usually it's one team doing the bulk of the programming work, but then, or whatever it is, one team that has to support it, operations, one finance has to figure out how to wire it up, and then you have sales and marketing or whatever, right? There's all these teams that have to get on board, and very often the people at the top cannot agree on the path forward. And that for whatever reason, the CEO is, semi-absentee or doing other things, too busy thinking about it. So you end up having to get executive order from very low in the company as opposed from very high in the company. So what are your thoughts on that? Like any strategies?
It helps to have a strategy that helps bring people together.
You mean an overall
strategy? Mm-hmm. What I've found, and it's in the book and in research, is many companies don't have a strategy. It's a dirty little secret. Mm-hmm. And think about it. If you can't get in the elevator and know what your strategy is from the CEO, no one knows what they're doing. Mm-hmm. I mean, everyone's kind of fending for themselves. Now, if it's profit mode organization, we kind of have that gluing us together.
Slightly, anyway.
But I would...
But even that, there's conflicts. Like, this project is better than that project.
I would enlist the help of my boss, who's at that level, and explain what the situation is and say, I need your help. And ask them to help you strategize and how to get them resolve those problems. Sometimes it's simple as shaming, public shaming, peer pressure. Let's have a report saying, okay, who's fallen behind? Mm-hmm. And let's send that to the CEO. Well, no one wants to be publicly shamed. So, I think public shaming, I'm a big fan of that. Enlisting help from the boss. And if they don't want to do it, well, if it falls apart, well, that's part of their job.
Okay. I just feel like that's going to end up being a quotable quote here. Okay. What about cross-team pollination? So again, big teams, sales and marketing almost always hate each other. Mm-hmm. I don't know what it is. I've done, whatever it is, like 80 interviews now. Maybe a third of them have been someone in sales or someone in marketing. And they pretty much genuinely agree that each other are doing it wrong. And both of them are, terrible at their jobs, and the other should be, reporting to whichever because they just can't get their stuff together. But ultimately they have to work together. They have to get it done. And so what do you think about actually making sure that these teams actually talk together, not just, hate one another arbitrarily or, have one meeting once a quarter or something and really don't get along?
So my experience is the application development team hates the systems in the infrastructure team. That's my
very similar.
Oh, very similar.
Very similar.
They don't understand each other, and the other one's stupid. But I bring all my direct reports together every week, and we talk about issues. And if the issue is one team's holding another team hostage, then we have a follow-up to work through that issue. You also hire for team players.
Yeah, how do you do that, out of curiosity?
So
get them to go play rugby together or something?
No, at the university, I try to have a mix of long-term university employees, because a lot of them are 30, 40 years, love the university, great, but I wanted 50% private industry, because you got to know the principles of IT. And if you've been growing up your whole life without professional leadership. So when I'd interview, like for the infrastructure director, I would call the references.
Mm-hmm.
And one was just so glowing, big entrepreneur here in town. And it was, so you have to reach out and ask, and then he recruited our, customer support person from that same company, and she was fantastic and team player. But you have to look for it.
Mm. I have noticed certain, I would say this is mostly women that fall in this category from my experience, although I have seen some guys as well. They're amazing employees, like really incredibly top notch, but they don't do a great job of selling what they do. So it's hard to get them hired because they're not really willing to talk about their accolades in the same way some male vibrato, just like, I did this, I did that, they're just a little bit more on their back heels on this one. But even worse when they're in the companies or organizations, they'll just get stepped on right and left. They're not getting the attribution for their hard work. And they notice it and they are very annoyed by it, but they don't say anything about it. So they can be a year or two of just disgruntled, things aren't going well because I'm not getting any recognitions for all this hard work and everyone around me is getting promoted and I'm not moving forward in my career. How do you deal with employees that just frankly are not good at self-promotion?
That's a difficult question. Part of it is I would ask myself, is there any skill building I can do? Is there any training I can offer? We all didn't get born into positions. We had to learn skills. I had a direct report, actually 3 or 4, who were terrible at public speaking. They're in front of the customers, and I'm just horrified at, they're technically brilliant, but could not really communicate. And so I brought a company in, Speakeasy, that says you don't have to be born with the ability to public speak. You can learn the skill, just like building authentic business relationships, a learned skill. And we came in, I had all those people go on-site training. They did the videotaping, they did all the practicing and everything. And they became really good at selling, to the customers what we were doing. And then off cycle, we would have them go to Toastmasters and just practice, and that helped build some confidence.
Interesting. Yeah, there's a couple of people who I'm pretty close to who are frankly amazing people, and I don't really know how to get them over the next step. So maybe it's just more public speaking, just get them in front of more people and used to. But even that, I've seen them public speak. A couple of people I'm thinking of off the top of my head, and they're good at it. Like the words come out clear. There's not a lot of ums and that kind of thing. But what isn't good is then they won't say the great stories that they have. They're like they think it's too much or whatever, and that's always worrying because then how are people going to know anything about how amazing they really are?
Well, if I'm a friend, I would coach them on that.
Yeah, I think I'll probably spend more time doing that. I'm always worried about these people. Anyway, that's a weird aside, but I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the onboarding process or hiring process, I guess, from the employee side. I've helped a number of people get into companies where they felt that they were not going to be able to negotiate their position. And after some coaching and thinking through it, they were able to get everything they asked for, and sometimes way, way more than they were thinking they could get, moving bonuses, or, more vacation time, or more time not working, or greater bonus structures, or all kinds of different ways to do it. Like one of them, like, you didn't have a car. I'm like, you can just negotiate that they'll give you a car, or that they will give you a driver for a couple of weeks while you figure out your life there and buy a car or whatever, right? There's all these things the company can do. They don't want to do it, but as part of the negotiation process, maybe they agree it's worth doing for you, but that's a matter of selling yourself and whatever. Anyway, do you have any guidance on that process?
If you don't ask, you're not going to get it. Yeah, you have to ask what's important. And if it's important and you ask and you don't get it, then you ask, why am I pursuing it? But you have to ask. I noticed several times in my book, I say, use your words. And having 2 boys raised, and
yeah, sure.
I hear you whining. I can't help you unless you use your words. And the other phrase I use is, when you're the boss, your people are not mind readers. So use your words. So I think, you just can't be shy about what you need. And that's to the set and manage expectations that I talk about.
Sure.
So first is goals and aspirations, set and manage expectations, and then genuinely care about their success. Those 3 principles underlie every business relationship.
Yeah, I think the valuing them thing in this context is very useful, because if you think about it, if you know that this person's excellent and you know that they really don't have a car, and are you really going to say, let's throw the baby out with the bathwater on this one? You're going to go, look, okay, we got to make some accommodations for this person. That's a little bit of a weird scenario. I agree. Why doesn't he have a car? Yes, we'll all ask that question
Could
later.
it come from a city with real public transportation?
Yeah. And the one thing I do caution in that process, though, is generally speaking, a well-negotiated deal leaves both people wanting a little bit more. You generally speaking, if you get everything you want, you have taken everything that the other can give, and that leaves them in a really bad situation. So don't expect to get everything, because if you get everything, you've probably over-negotiated. Not saying they won't give it, but now, like the problem is, if you go in and get a crazy high salary, let's say, and they're like, okay, this person's going to move mountains for us, and they got in there and they're a new employee. They don't even know where the printer is yet, so there's this weird lag, but not weird. It's a totally normal, acceptable lag. If you had negotiated your salary just down slightly, there'd be a lot more slack. But because you're this highfalutin, highest paid person in the company, they're like, wow, you should be, handling this and that and this. And they're like, yeah, I don't, what's my email address again? So I don't know. I think there's some middle ground there. You have to be a little cautious.
I think you have to think, what do I want, and what are the priorities? And, do you have to get everything?
Yeah, probably not.
When I joined the firm, I was working in the federal government, and I had 4 weeks of vacation, and I was a GS11, which is mid-level, not too shabby. And I talked to the partner, and he goes, well, you don't know the difference between an air conditioner and a computer, so I don't think we can give you 4 weeks of vacation and your salary, but we'll give you great training.
All right.
And I went for it.
All right. That's the next path. All right. I wanted to talk a little bit about in the process of being an honest employee, and you were saying there's a lot of people changing emails. I've not encountered this one. I've encountered a lot of nefarious things in meetings. Maybe I'm not paying enough attention. Maybe this has happened and I just never noticed. Bliss, ignorance is bliss. But one thing I have encountered is people doing pocket vetoes. So to your face, they'll say, yeah, I'll totally get on that. I'm absolutely going to do it. And yes, we're on agreement. And sometimes it comes down from executive teams. Like executives say, this is going to happen. And everyone's like, yep. and then it actually comes to go and implement it, and everyone's like, we're not doing that. So what's your take on that sort of behavior?
Unacceptable. It's like, I'm going to trust everybody in the beginning. I'm going to give everybody a chance. And if you say you're going to do something, I'm going to assume you're going to do it. My director, who I fired before the winter holidays, he'd say he'd do it, then he wouldn't do it. And in the next one-on-one, I'd say, next time you decide not to do what I ask you to do, you need to tell me that, so I will get someone who will do it.
Or tell me that there's a really very good reason why not, right? I mean, if there's a legitimate reason not to do it, great, but I need to know that.
Exactly. But that I knew that was irreparable.
Right. Interesting. Okay, and what about the other direction? So as an employee, oftentimes managers or executive managers will make extremely poor decisions, like really, really poor decisions. And so at what point should you as an employee be holding your manager or your manager's managers accountable for their misdeeds or just genuine mistakes?
They need to hold you accountable. You need to hold them accountable. That is fair game. So I had a boss who was slow to approve maintenance requests. And, it's like, okay, you need to keep your stuff updated. So in person I asked, and he was just foot dragging the approval of this. And so finally I wrote this ask covering email saying that if we don't get these approved, we're going to be in violation of university policy, University of Texas system policy, state law, and I copied the CISO on it. And I don't know if they just didn't think about it or, but that nudge with my ass covering email.
Obviously.
Everything got approved.
I've run into one situation that actually resolved itself in a very good way as well, where the guy I was working for, really brilliant guy, everything was good, except for he had this one weird 2-month period where he stopped trusting me for some reason. And I don't know what was going on. Like, I don't really feel like I deserved it, but just like there was other people in the team. So anytime they'd say something, didn't matter what it was, he would agree with them and disagree with me. And it was, some of these things could go either way. So, I'm not like, really upset about it, but I'm seeing a trend and it's getting worse. And he's actually disagreeing with me on things that are absolutely provably going the other direction. Like, not just theoretically, like provably I have the data to back up what I'm saying. So I called him up one day. I'm like, I don't know what happened. Do you think I forgot how everything in this company works like in the last 2 months? And he's like, no, why? I'm like, because I give him all the evidence of all the decisions he's made.
Good.
And with like the data to back up what I was saying. And he's like, oh yeah, actually I don't, don't quit, don't leave. Like, I can see why that looks that way. Yes, actually, I think I was just on autopilot kind of more, just their voice sounded better than your voice, he really was. He was on autopilot for a little while. He's just too busy with life stuff. So then he started paying a lot more attention in the meetings, and all of a sudden things started ratcheting in the right direction again. And I wasn't really hurt about it, but I'm like, look, we got to get this fixed right now because you're making a lot of poor choices here.
Yeah, so that's holding him accountable.
Yeah.
And it's fair. You do it respectfully, but you can't not do that.
Right. And I didn't start with you're making a bunch of bad decisions. I'm like, is there something that changed in the last couple of months that I need to know about? And he's like, no, what do you mean? Well, on his side, his life had been upended and, so that was where that was really coming from, but it wasn't visible from my perspective at all.
Well, and I had a boss who had 2 of my direct reports in the penalty box, and it's like, I didn't get it. It's like, and I called him out and I said, why do you have these two people in the penalty box. Well, it was Frank. Frank, remember Frank? Evil Frank
Oh.
was
Was it Fred or Frank? No, I can't remember.
Frank. It's in the book. Frank. And, I said, you need to meet with them individually and just talk with them. Because remember, warmer in person.
Mm-hmm.
And he met with them individually. And, of course, they're blowing the doors off everything we ask them to do. And, afterwards he goes, well, thank you for doing that. They're excellent. It's like, well, yeah.
Yeah, they're my employees.
But it's like, you have to sometimes step in and hold the boss accountable for actions
Oh, totally.
on other people that.
All right. So how do you set yourself up for success as you're going into a new role as a boss? Like you're inheriting a team, let's say, or maybe you're even hiring a team from scratch. But like, how do you make sure that you're going to come out giving yourself as many of the tools possible to be successful?
I start with the listening tour, and I just need to learn as much as I can about the organization, the culture, the people, and solicit input, and just especially the first 90 days are so important. I'm not making any pronouncements. I'm just trying to understand what's working and push that, and what's not working and stop that. I had one organization that had a really toxic culture, and they prided themselves on being heroes and firefighters.
Mm-hmm.
And if something would break, they'd rush in and save the day. Well, that's the opposite of me. I'm like, let's plan way ahead and prepare. So, when it happens, we fix it. But let's avoid unnecessary heroics.
Mm-hmm.
And I had one fellow who was responsible for a enterprise system that affected almost everyone in the enterprise. He would put fixes in at 10 in the morning. Who does that? And leave. And he wouldn't answer his phone. It's like, okay, why don't you answer your phone?
Mm.
Well, I don't want to disturb my office mates. You need to answer your phone. 2, don't put bug fixes in at 10 in the morning and leave,
Mm-hmm.
and bring it down for 2 hours. So we wrote him up. He just didn't like answering his phone. So we said, well, you know what? You have a cell phone. You need to answer your phone.
Yeah, no kidding.
And he squeezed himself out. He never could, So I had to change the culture almost one by one, belly button by belly button, that we don't reward heroics in firefighting because we're more like Keystone Cops half the time.
Mm-hmm.
And what we want to reward is proactive thinking. First 90 days, what equipment and software needs to be updated? We had stuff that was 8 to 10 years old. My first year was 2009, H1N1 swine flu. University of 70,000 people. President goes, can we go online? I said, no. Why not? Our equipment's 8 to 10 years old. Our learning management system is buggy. Students hate it. And our tech support is erratic. And our vendor is erratic. Our email system's 18 years old, custom made, custom built.
What?
Students have a maximum 50 emails. To get the next one, you have to delete one.
What?
And faculty, 100 emails.
What?
To get the next one, you have to delete.
What if they have 101 students?
You get 50 emails at one time. And so that wasn't scalable. No file sharing, very expensive. couldn't do it. I mean, even if I could buy a Sun Solaris server, I would be last on the list of, there'd be healthcare, public safety. I'm like way down number 47 on the list. Mm-hmm. So I said, no, we can't do it. And fortunately that passed, but that scared the bejesus out of me. And that's when we started our 8-year march to the cloud. Mm. And so the first was learning management system. Then it was UT branded Gmail with privacy and safeguards, Box for file sharing, Qualtrics for surveys, 365 Teams for faculty email and staff, 21,000 staff, ServiceNow for service, Workday HR payroll. Yeah, we moved as much to the cloud as we could. And each one took 2 years because we're just so friggin' big. And so I retired in 2017. March 2020 arrives. My successor, can we go online? And he was able to increase Zoom and increase VPN, and 70,000 people went online in 2 weeks.
Wow.
That was amazing.
That is amazing. Okay. So let's talk about like 360 reviews, because I think you have some opinions on those. Mm-hmm. There's a bunch of different vendors out there. There's different ways to do it. Any preferences?
No. The firm had their own that aligned to the values that you were evaluated on. So I found that very helpful. Don't tie them to performance. This is off cycle from any annual review or anything. This is really your opportunity to know what your peers think of you, your staff.
Really? You don't tie it to it?
No.
Well, so how do you...
Then it's punitive. It should be identify weaknesses and then address those with skill building.
Because literally that's what everyone does. Everyone ties it to performance everywhere.
They shouldn't.
I know, but they do.
No, that's punitive. And
Interesting.
then people don't want to do it. I loved hearing feedback. I had a team my last 2 years at Accenture that were all over the U.S., and I would go to the project sites, and Whirlpool, Deutsche Bank, Bell South, whatever, and I called it my Winnebago trips, and FaceTime with the client and the staff. And they just loved that I would get out of my home office, get on the Winnebago, and go visit and get feedback from the client and from them and all levels, from executive to first-year staff. And, that came out in the 360, that they really appreciated that. And so I kept doing it. Some things not so good came out, like... I tend to get overexcited, and I need to bite my tongue once in a while, so I practice that, It's like, slow down, listen, don't speak too quickly. So, learnable traits that you can focus on. And then, with your direct reports, it gives them something to focus on. The other thing I would do is offer up career coaches.
Yeah.
And, because they're out of the management structure, they're independent, usually let your direct report interview 2 or 3 of them, and those have always been really effective, because it's a trusting relationship that I also get feedback from the coach of things I can be doing differently.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
And
so it's not just for them. It's the whole team.
And I remember one guy said, well, help me smooth out my sharp elbows.
That's right. Okay. Well, what do you feel about the different technical ways of communication? You got, phone and email and Slack and, text messages and Signal and everything else. Like, Do you have any preferences on the right ways to do it? Zoom is a big one these days, or Microsoft Teams or something. There's a lot of changes because of the pandemic. Are there preferences on the right tools for the job that you like?
I think email is fine for asynchronous communication. You don't need everything right away. I don't need a text or a Slack or anything. I think I like Teams, the way they've integrated, the network, the phone capability and the video capability. That's evolved quite a bit. I think Zoom is great. I was on a Zoom call today planning for a 40th reunion. One woman's in Little Rock, other dude is in California. The organizer is elsewhere, but to just hop on and see each other and talk through, that was fun.
I generally personally feel like Slack is a bit of, I hate saying it this way because it's not quite what I mean, but I think you'll get what I mean. It's a bit of an invasion of their privacy. It's like always pinging them, and it assumes that they're going to be available the very second you need to send them information.
I hate that.
Right? Okay. I'm glad I'm not the only one.
I tried it, but I'm not. I agree with you. It's too distracting.
Yeah, it's like, distracting is a part of it for sure, but it's also like, what if I'm like in the bathroom or something? My phone's like binging, or I'm between two meetings and I just need to like get a drink of water or something, and like I'm having to deal with this thing right this second. Is it like really right this second? Is that when you really need me to do this? Because if not, why isn't it asynchronous? Yeah. And not that email's great, but at least it prioritizes conversations to the point where I'll get to it when I can. Yeah. And if it's truly important, fine, text message me, or if Slack was only used for that purpose, fine. But it's not. It's used for like memes and stuff. And how do I filter out all memes? How do I get like all non-necessary communication out of this, this alerting structure? And you just can't really do that. That granularity is missing.
One thing that I tried to emulate as a leader is to model the behaviors I want to see. And at the university, our organization had a set of values, and number one was family first. And I said, if you have a doctor's appointment, I want you to go to the doctor's appointment. We have 330 people here who can back you up. If you have a school play and your child's in it, you should go see it. We have 330 people to back you up. If you're sick, don't be a hero. Stay home. Don't get us sick. Don't answer email all hours of the night. Work hard when you're here, then leave. Go read a book or something. Work out. And then I would model that. And if someone sent some message, I wouldn't reply right away. It's like, I'm not doing that, because I had to demonstrate, like when I was on vacation, whoever I had is in charge is in charge. I'm not in charge. So I think setting those boundaries it's important, because people need a life, especially in the tech world. Mm-hmm. You could work 24 hours a day.
I have done that before. Stints. Well, sometimes you did just as required, but that's the firefighting you're talking about.
Or it's go live on a
it's a different kind of firefighting
payroll system, and you're going to be up all day doing it.
I did one pen test that took an entire 24-hour period because I could only do it over 24 hours. Yeah. So, and funny enough, I took them down for the first 12 hours. So I'm like, I wonder if it was that one that I did the test on. And the funny thing is, they're like, yeah, keep going. I'm like, every time I run anything against your site, it goes down. They're like, yeah, just keep going. So it was down for 24 hours once. And then again, so it was 2 tests in a row over 24 hours. I'm like, this is a terrible idea. You guys really don't know what you're doing. Wow. But it was 24 hours. Brutal. Okay, to round us out, I think this would be kind of a fun one. Like, What are the characteristics you look for when you're trying to either emulate or go work for a great leader? Like, what are the kind of the best qualities of them?
Having a vision for where they're going. One thing I enjoyed about President Powers, who's no longer with us, is he had a strategy for the university. And so we all knew what direction we were headed. And then when I came in to help with the IT strategy, we aligned that with the overall strategy. And so we had a clear roadmap. And, for 8 years, we knew we worked together as an executive team, and he was extremely supportive. But you don't always have that. And, changing leadership, you could lose that. So, but I look for someone who does have a vision where they're going. In the firm, there's so much of the culture is, ethical behavior and quality service and grit and training and mentoring. It's just everyone kind of embodied those. So anyone who didn't was pretty well jettisoned along the way. Mm.
Well, I really enjoyed your book. Can you tell us where to get it? And
wherever books are sold.
Okay.
It was launched on March 12th and is already an Amazon bestseller.
Awesome. Congratulations.
So there's a lot of pre-orders. Thank goodness. It's also on Kindle. It's on the audiobook will be out on Spotify and other Audible channels in 2 weeks. And hope you enjoy it.
And so it'll probably be out right around the time this comes out. So that's perfect timing.
Yeah, that's great.
Well, Brad, I really appreciate you coming down and doing this. This is a very fun book to read, and I learned a lot, actually. So
I did have someone late in their career said, "I wish I read this 50 years ago."
Yeah, no, I got a couple things out of this, some good findings. So I really appreciate it, Brad.
Great.
Thanks for coming down.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.